Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
There's a kind of connection that doesn't look dramatic from the outside. No grand reunion, no movie scene, no one standing in the rain confessing love. Sometimes, it looks like two people slowly ruining their sleep over each other while pretending they're completely fine. It looks like him checking her profile at 1:13 in the morning, then putting his phone face down like that somehow proves he's detached. It looks like her suddenly feeling heavy for no reason right round the exact hour he almost texted her and didn't. And honestly, I used to roll my eyes at this kind of thing. Until it happened to me. Until I watched someone leave emotionally before they left physically. Until I felt someone miss me while actively avoiding me. Until I realized the strangest part of certain connections is not how intense they are. It's how invisible they become. Because the real connection was never in the words. It was in the pauses, the timing, the body language, the unfinished sentences, the silence after I'm fine. And maybe that's what makes this so confusing. Part of you feels crazy. The other part knows exactly what happened. Even now, I still go back and forth between. Maybe I imagined all of it. And no, human beings do not unravel like that over something meaningless. This isn't really a story about perfect love. It's about two people who felt something real, and then reacted to it in painfully human ways. I don't think people talk enough about how certain connections begin quietly, not dramatically, not romantically at first. Sometimes it starts with your body becoming aware of someone before your mind catches up. And I know how that sounds. A year ago, I probably would have rolled my eyes hearing someone say that I liked explanations, logic, timing, compatibility, shared interests. I wanted emotions to make sense in clean, adult ways. Then I met someone who disrupted my emotional rhythm so subtly that I didn't even notice it happening until I was already thinking about them during completely unrelated moments. Like standing in a grocery store holding pasta sauce and suddenly replaying one sentence they said 3 days earlier. Not even an important sentence. Just, you always pause before answering serious questions. That was it. But somehow it stayed. And the strange part wasn't that they noticed me. It was that I felt seen in a place I hadn't realized I'd been hiding. That's what changed things. Not attraction. Recognition. And honestly, recognition is scarier. Because attraction is manageable, you can flirt with attraction, you can explain it away. Attraction stays on the surface long enough for you to feel in control. Recognition doesn't. Recognition slips past the version of yourself you carefully organized for other people. I remember the exact moment something shifted, though I didn't understand it at the time. We were sitting somewhere ordinary. That's important to mention because people always expect life-changing moments to happen in cinematic places. This happened under fluorescent lighting, a completely forgettable cafe, bad music, one of the air conditioners making that low rattling noise every 30 seconds. And they were talking about something insignificant, work stress maybe, or family. I honestly don't remember the topic anymore. What I remember is the pause. They stopped talking for maybe 2 seconds, looked at me, and suddenly I had the uncomfortable feeling that this person could tell when I was emotionally leaving the room even while physically sitting there. It made me nervous immediately. Not butterflies, not excitement, nervous. There's a difference. Butterflies feel light. This felt exposing. And I think people misunderstand connections like this because they assume intensity always feels good. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like someone accidentally walked into a room inside you that you hadn't cleaned yet. I became weird after that. Not visibly weird. Internally weird. Like checking if they viewed my story, and then getting annoyed at myself for checking. Like rereading conversations while pretending I was just looking for information. Like becoming hyper-aware of response times. And the embarrassing thing is I wasn't even fully emotionally attached yet. That came later. At this stage it was mostly confusion. Because nothing obvious had happened. No confession. No late-night emotional conversation. No dramatic intimacy. Just tiny moments that somehow carried emotional weight way beyond what they should have. I remember once they touched my arm while laughing. Normal human interaction. But my body reacted before my thoughts did. Not romantically even. More like my nervous system suddenly sat upright and went, "Oh, that person matters." Which is ridiculous. How can your body decide someone matters before you've logically approved it? I fought that feeling for weeks, maybe months. Partially because I didn't trust people who affected me too quickly, and partially because they didn't seem fully safe emotionally either. That's another thing nobody admits honestly enough. Sometimes you recognize someone and simultaneously recognize their emotional unavailability. Those two things can exist together. Actually, they often do. Part of him felt deeply present. Another part already felt halfway gone. And I noticed both. The warmth and the distance. The attentiveness and the restraint. He would hold eye contact too long sometimes, then emotionally disappear for hours afterward like he regretted revealing too much. At the time, I interpreted the inconsistency as disinterest. Now I think it was overwhelm. Or maybe both. See, that's the problem with trying to explain human connection too neatly. Most people are feeling multiple contradictory things at once. I know I was. There were days I wanted to see him. Then the moment he texted, I suddenly wanted space. There were moments I felt emotionally close to him, followed immediately by the urge to emotionally retreat and regain control of myself. I remember one night specifically. I was lying in bed pretending to watch something on my laptop while actually rereading our conversation for the 4th time. Not because it was romantic, because I was trying to decode it. Trying to understand why completely normal interactions felt emotionally loud afterward. At one point, I literally closed the laptop and said out loud to myself, "This is getting unhealthy." And maybe it was. But I think what disturbed me wasn't obsession. It was vulnerability. There is a very specific discomfort that happens when someone starts mattering before you've decided whether they're safe to matter. That changes your behavior in subtle ways. You become careful with your tone. You notice small shifts. You hear emotional meaning in pauses. You start remembering things unintentionally, the exact way they sighed before admitting something vulnerable, the way they looked away during compliments, how their voice sounded lower when they were tired. Tiny details. Not because you're trying to memorize them, because emotionally significant things imprint themselves automatically. And honestly, I think he felt it too. Not in a mystical way, in a human way. You could see it in his hesitation. Sometimes he would start saying something emotionally honest, then abruptly redirect into humor like he regretted becoming visible. One time he almost told me something real. I could feel it. You know those moments where the atmosphere changes slightly, where someone's emotional guard slips for half a second. It happened and then, "Anyway," he said. Anyway. That word probably delayed months of honesty. And I remember feeling irrationally disappointed afterward, which confused me because technically nothing had happened. That was the beginning of the invisible part. Not telepathy, not destiny, just two people reacting to emotional depth they weren't fully prepared for. And the strange thing is, These connections rarely begin with certainty. They begin with disruption. Suddenly, your routines feel different. Music sounds different. Silence feels heavier. Your phone becomes emotionally dangerous. You tell yourself you don't care that much while checking for their message before even getting out of bed. You start having internal arguments with yourself. This is probably just projection. Okay, then why does his absence change the emotional temperature of your entire day? That's dramatic. Is it? I think that's why connections like this make people feel slightly crazy. Because externally, life still looks normal. You're still going to work, still answering emails, still folding laundry, still buying toothpaste. Meanwhile, internally, one person's energy. No, not energy. Presence. One person's presence starts quietly reorganizing your emotional world. And maybe the hardest part is that nobody else can see it happening. To everyone else, you look fine. Meanwhile, you're sitting in traffic replaying the exact tone of their voice when they said, "Text me when you get home." Like it meant more than it should have. Maybe it didn't mean more. Maybe humans simply reveal themselves unintentionally in small moments. That's another uncomfortable truth. Big declarations are easy. Micro behaviors are harder to fake. The delayed goodbye, the lingering glance, the emotional withdrawal after intimacy, the way someone suddenly becomes quiet around the person who affects them most. I saw all of it in him eventually, but during the beginning, it was mostly fragments, almost moments, interrupted honesty, emotional static. And maybe that's why the connection became invisible in the first place. Because neither of us fully knew what was happening yet. We only knew something felt different, something slightly frightening, something emotionally expensive. And the worst part of me knew early, not logically, not spiritually, just somewhere deeper than explanation. The kind of knowing that arrives quietly and ruins your emotional peace before your life has any evidence for it at all. I think one of the most confusing parts of certain connections is realizing your body reacts long before your thoughts become honest. And I don't mean that in some beautiful, mystical way. I mean physically. Like your stomach tightening when their name appears on your phone even though you were completely calm 2 seconds earlier. Like suddenly waking up at 3:17 a.m. for no clear reason, then seeing they posted something 8 minutes ago. Like your chest feeling heavy after a short conversation that sounded perfectly normal on paper. That was the part nobody prepared me for. Not the emotions. The inconsistency between what I claimed to feel and what my nervous system was obviously doing. Because intellectually, I kept trying to minimize it. It's not that serious. You barely know him. You're projecting. You're just emotionally available right now. Meanwhile, my body was behaving like something important was happening. And honestly, that irritated me. I remember one afternoon sitting at work pretending to focus on an email while we're reading his last message underneath the desk like it contained classified information. It didn't. It literally just said, "Hope your meeting went okay." Normal sentence. Friendly sentence. But there was something about the timing. I had mentioned the meeting casually almost 9 hours earlier. I forgot about it completely. He didn't. And for some reason, that tiny detail stayed with me all day. Not because it was romantic. Because it felt attentive in a way that bypassed performance. That's the thing people misunderstand. It's usually not the big gestures that create emotional attachment. It's consistency, attention, the small moments where someone remembers something you assumed they'd forget. And once your body starts associating someone with emotional safety or emotional intensity, it reacts automatically, even when your mind is still undecided. That's where the confusion started. Because consciously, I was trying to remain detached. But unconsciously, I was building routines around him, checking my phone before brushing my teeth, looking for his name before fully waking up, feeling disappointment rife before I even admitted I was expecting a message. And the embarrassing part is how subtle these behaviors begin. You don't notice them immediately. At first, it just feels like curiosity. Then, suddenly you realize you've checked whether they viewed your story 4 times in 20 minutes, while telling yourself you absolutely do not care. I became emotionally ridiculous in very private ways. One night I typed out a message, deleted it, typed a shorter version, deleted that too. Then I locked my phone dramatically like, "No, we are emotionally regulated." 10 minutes later I unlocked it again, not even to text him, just to reread the conversation, like my brain was trying to extract emotional certainty from punctuation. And I know how pathetic that sounds. But if we're being honest, most people become a little psychologically strange when they start caring deeply, especially when the connection itself feels unclear. That uncertainty does something to the body, because certainty allows people to relax. Uncertainty creates hyper-awareness. You start noticing response times, changes in tone, energy shifts, the emotional texture of silence. And sometimes the body reacts before there's actual evidence anything is wrong. That part drove me insane. There were days he would become slightly quieter, not cruel, not cold, just different, and my entire nervous system would notice immediately. Even before my thoughts caught up, I'd suddenly feel restless, unable to focus, checking my phone without realizing it. Then eventually I'd stop and think, what is wrong with you? Because logically, nothing had happened. But emotionally, something had shifted. And I think this is where people start feeling crazy in these kinds of connections. Not because they're delusional, because humans are actually very sensitive to emotional inconsistency, especially when attachment is involved. Your body notices withdrawal long before language explains it. A delayed response suddenly feels louder. A shorter sentence feels distant. A missing emoji becomes emotional forensic evidence, which sounds irrational until you've lived it. Then suddenly you understand why people replay tiny interactions in their heads while driving home at night. I remember one specific evening. I was sitting in my car outside my apartment holding the steering wheel long after turning the engine off. Just sitting there replaying a conversation. Not even a serious conversation. But something about him felt emotionally elsewhere that night. Distracted, guarded, and I could feel myself trying to convince myself it didn't matter. He's probably tired. You're overthinking. People are allowed to have moods. All true. But another voice underneath kept whispering. No, something moved. That internal split became exhausting. The logical mind versus the emotional body. One trying to stay reasonable, the other reacting in real time. And honestly, sometimes the body was right before the facts arrived. That's the uncomfortable truth. Not always, but enough times to make me stop dismissing my reactions completely. I started noticing patterns in him too, especially after moments of closeness. That was the strangest part. You would expect intimacy to create more openness. Sometimes with him, it created retreat. After emotionally vulnerable conversations, he often became quieter the next day. Not mean, not detached completely, just slightly withdrawn, like someone who touched a hot stove accidentally. At first, I took it personally. I thought, I shared too much. I overwhelmed him. He regrets opening up. Maybe part of that was true. But later I realized some people experience emotional closeness as exposure instead of comfort. And exposure triggers strange behavior. Suddenly they need space, distraction, distance, even from the person they were just craving. Especially from the person they were just craving. That contradiction took me a long time to understand, because part of him genuinely wanted intimacy. You could see it in the way he listened when he forgot to guard himself, in the way his voice softened unexpectedly sometimes, in the way he would ask emotionally personal questions, then look almost uncomfortable to receiving honest answers. Like he wanted closeness right until the moment it became real. Then his nervous system would panic and start pulling him backward emotionally. And the worst part, I started adapting to those shifts without realizing it. That's what happens slowly in emotionally inconsistent dynamics. Your body learns the pattern. So eventually, even good moments stop feeling fully relaxing because part of you anticipates the withdrawal afterward. That anticipation changes you. You become observant in unhealthy ways, emotionally predictive. You notice his energy before words. You prepare for silence before it arrives. I hated that version of myself, the hyper-vigilant version, the one analyzing whether his good night sounded emotionally warm enough, the one pretending not to wait for messages while literally keeping the phone in reach all evening. One night my friend asked, "Why don't you just ask him what's going on?" And I remember laughing because technically nothing was happening. That's what made it so psychologically difficult to explain. There was no obvious conflict, no betrayal, no dramatic event, just emotional static, closeness, distance, return, silence, attention, withdrawal, over and over. And somewhere inside that cycle, my body stopped trusting stability. I remember hearing his voice one evening after a few distant days and physically feeling relief before I even processed the conversation. Relief. That's when I realized this had gone deeper than attraction. Because attraction excites you. This was regulating me and dysregulating me at the same time, which is honestly not romantic when you're living inside it. People romanticize emotional intensity because they usually describe it afterward. They don't describe the actual physical experience in real time. The headaches, the overthinking, the emotional exhaustion from pretending you were unaffected, the shame of caring this much when the relationship itself still feels undefined. And underneath all of it was this strange invisible synchronization neither of us acknowledged directly. I could feel when he was emotionally near me again. Not spiritually, behaviorally. His attention changed. His tone softened. His presence returned. Then suddenly my body relaxed too, like it had been bracing unconsciously. And maybe that's why connections like this become addictive. Not because of constant closeness, because of intermittent emotional relief. The return after distance, the warmth after uncertainty. Human beings attach deeply to emotional unpredictability even while suffering inside it. That realization honestly made me sad. Because at some point I had to ask myself a difficult question. Are you attached to him? Or attached to the feeling of finally being emotionally reached after silence? I didn't know. Maybe both. That's another ugly truth nobody says out loud enough. Sometimes the body confuses relief with love. Sometimes emotional inconsistency intensifies attachment instead of weakening it. And sometimes the people are standing in front of each other genuinely feeling something real, while simultaneously triggering every emotional survival strategy they've ever learned. Which explains why nobody could simply relax. Not him, not me. Especially not once the body already knew what the mind was still trying to deny. I used to think distance meant lack of feeling. That if someone cared deeply, they would naturally move closer, communicate more, become clearer, more emotionally available. Then I met someone who seemed to do the exact opposite. The closer we became emotionally, the stranger his behavior got. And I don't mean toxic in the obvious way. Not cruel. Not manipulative in some calculated mastermind sense. Honestly, it was messier than that. More human. More confusing. It looked like a man who genuinely wanted connection, while simultaneously reacting to intimacy like it was something dangerous. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. I just knew the pattern hurt. We would have these moments, quiet moments, usually where something real slipped through. Not dramatic confessions. Just honesty without performance. Like sitting in the car after getting food, and somehow ending up talking about childhood memories neither of us planned to mention. Or him suddenly admitting something vulnerable while staring straight ahead at traffic because eye contact made it harder. Those were the moments where he felt emotionally present. Not impressive. Not charming. Present. And every single time we reached that level of closeness, he disappeared a little afterward. Not completely. That's what made it confusing. He would still text, still respond, still ask how my day was. But emotionally, it felt like someone slowly stepping backward while pretending they were standing still. I remember the first time I noticed it clearly. The night before had been unexpectedly intimate emotionally, not physically. Honestly, I think emotional intimacy scared him more. We stayed up till late talking about life in that exhausted, unguarded way people do after midnight. At one point there was this long silence between us. Not awkward, just full. And he looked at me like he almost forgot to protect himself for a second. That look stayed with me. Not because it was romantic, because it looked terrified. Soft but terrified. The next morning he was different. Still polite. Still there technically, but flatter somehow. His texts became shorter. His energy less open. And I remember sitting on my bed staring at my phone thinking, what did I do? That question became embarrassingly familiar. What did I say? Did I overwhelm him? Was I too emotional? Too available? Too honest? It took me a long time to realize his withdrawal wasn't always about me specifically. Sometimes closeness itself overwhelmed him. There are people who can handle desire more easily than emotional exposure. Flirting, easy. Chemistry, manageable. But genuine emotional intimacy, that's where panic starts. Because attraction lets people perform. Intimacy removes performance. And I think part of him survived through emotional control for so long that vulnerability felt physically unsafe. Not metaphorically unsafe. Unsafe in his body. You could see it happen in real time sometimes. He would open up, then immediately self-correct. Like someone reaching for a hot pan before realizing it burns. One night he almost admitted he missed me. I swear he almost said it. He paused, looked down, smiled slightly like he regretted becoming sincere. Then he said, "You've just been on my mind lately." Lately. That word carried the emotional weight of an entire confession and somehow still avoided one. And honestly, part of me wanted to shake him. Not out of anger, out of frustration. Because I could feel how much effort it took for him to say even that much. Which sounds compassionate now. At the time it felt maddening. Especially because his actions contradicted each other constantly. He would initiate closeness, then retreat once he received it. He would create emotional intimacy, then act overwhelmed by its existence. He would miss me, then ignore me for hours after meaningful conversations. At one point, one remember thinking, this man experiences feelings like allergic reactions. And maybe that sounds harsh, But there's a specific kind of pain that comes from watching someone care about you while actively resisting the experience of caring. It creates emotional whiplash because you start questioning your own reality, especially when the connection feels undeniable one moment and emotionally unavailable the next. I remember one particular evening so clearly. He had been distant all day, not cold, just detached enough for my body to notice. Then suddenly around midnight he called me. No explanation. His voice sounded tired, soft in that way people sound when they stop trying so hard to maintain emotional structure. We talked for almost an hour, about nothing important really. Music, stress, random memories. But underneath the conversation was this feeling that he needed connection and resented needing it at the same time. I could hear it. Every time the conversation became slightly deeper, he redirected into humor. Every time silence lingered too long, he pulled back emotionally. At one point, I stopped talking because I realized something uncomfortable. He sounded calmer when he forgot himself. The real version of him appeared accidentally, in pauses, in exhaustion, in moments where he stopped managing perception. And those moments made the withdrawal afterward even harder to understand. Because once you've seen emotional depth in someone, distance feels personal even when it isn't. That's the trap. You begin holding to contradictory realities at once. He feels something real, and he is still emotionally unavailable. Both can be true simultaneously. That realization honestly broke something in me for a while. Because emotionally immature avoidance is confusing precisely because it contains genuine feeling inside it. If there were no feelings, the behavior would make more sense. But there were feelings. Visible ones. Small involuntary ones. The way his voice changed around me sometimes. The way he remembered tiny details. The way he looked emotionally overwhelmed after vulnerable moments. I noticed all of it. And I think he hated that I noticed. Not consciously, maybe. But there's something deeply unsettling about being emotionally seen by someone when you've spent years surviving through partial invisibility. He once asked me, "How do you always know when something's wrong?" I laughed it off at the time. But internally I remember thinking, because you leak emotion everywhere while pretending you don't have any. That was the strange contradiction of him. He thought he was hiding. Meanwhile, his silence became louder than language. His withdrawal after closeness said more than actual confessions could have. And honestly, I don't think he understood himself fully either. That's important. People love turning emotionally avoidant behavior into calculated manipulation narratives because certainty feels safer. But some people are genuinely confused by their own emotional reactions, especially men who were taught to experience vulnerability as loss of control. I could feel him fighting himself sometimes, wanting closeness, resenting dependence, wanting connection, needing distance. And underneath all of it was fear. Not fear of me exactly. Fear of what happened to him around me. Fear of emotional exposure. Fear of needing someone. Fear of being emotionally affected deeply enough that losing it would hurt. So instead of leaning closer, he kept trying to regulate the intensity by creating space. The problem is space doesn't erase attachment once attachment already exists. It just turns the attachment into longing, confusion, avoidance, overthinking, emotional suppression, and late-night phone calls that sound lonelier than either person wants to admit. There was one week where he became especially distant after we spent an unexpectedly good day together. That part always mattered. The withdrawal usually followed closeness, not conflict, which took me forever to understand. If we argued, at least the distance would make logical sense. But no. Sometimes the happiest moments triggered the strongest retreat. And I remember sitting in my kitchen one night feeling genuinely angry about it. Not dramatic anger. Exhausted anger. The kind where you're washing dishes too aggressively while replaying conversations in your head. I kept thinking, if you feel something, why are you acting like this? Then another thought came immediately after. What if this is exactly how someone acts when they feel too much? That realization didn't fix anything. It actually made it sadder. Because once you realize someone is emotionally overwhelmed rather than emotionally indifferent, you stop being able to fully hate them. But you also stop being able to relax. And that's the dangerous middle ground. Compassion mixed with emotional instability. Understanding mixed with unmet needs. You start excusing behaviors that still hurt you because you can see the fear underneath them. Meanwhile, the emotional inconsistency slowly drains both people. And the worst part, I think he knew he was doing it sometimes. You could see guilt in him occasionally, especially after long periods of distance. He would return softer, more attentive, almost careful, like someone approaching emotional wreckage quietly. But neither of us fully addressed the pattern directly. Maybe because naming it would make it real. Maybe because we were both afraid the truth would sound smaller out loud than it felt internally. Or maybe because part of him still believed distance would eventually reduce what he felt. It didn't. If anything, the silence just gave his feelings more room to echo inside him. Even if he never admitted that completely. Even if part of him still tried to run from it every time things became too real. I used to think silence meant absence. Now, I think silence can become its own form of communication. Its own atmosphere. Its own emotional room you keep walking into accidentally. Because there's a difference between two people not speaking and two people emotionally haunting each other in complete silence. That was the part nobody around me could see. From the outside, nothing dramatic had happened. No breakup announcement. No screaming fight. No final goodbye. Just distance. Quiet distance. The kind that looks manageable until you're the one lying awake at 2:11 a.m. staring at the ceiling replaying somebody's tone of voice from 3 weeks ago. And honestly, the silence didn't arrive all at once. It happened gradually. First, the conversations became shorter, then slower, then strangely careful. Like both of us were trying not to touch something emotionally sensitive. Even jokes started sounding restrained. And the strange thing is sometimes the silence felt louder after emotionally intimate moments. That confused me for a long time. You would think closeness creates safety. But with us, closeness often created emotional exposure first. Then came the retreat. I remember the first weekend we barely spoke after becoming emotionally close. I told myself I was fine. Very convincing performance. I cleaned my apartment aggressively. Reorganized kitchen cabinets that absolutely did not need reorganizing. Played music too loudly while pretending not to check my phone every 15 minutes. That's the embarrassing reality of emotional silence. People imagine heartbreak looking cinematic. Sometimes, it looks like standing in the laundry aisle at Target suddenly feeling devastated because you remembered how they laughed at something stupid 2 weeks earlier. No warning. No dramatic trigger. Just grief ambushing you in fluorescent lighting. And what made the silence worse was that it didn't feel clean. It felt unfinished. Like there were conversations sitting between us unsaid. Not necessarily huge confessions. Just emotional honesty we kept circling around without landing on. I think that's why silence becomes psychologically consuming sometimes. The mind keeps trying to finish what the heart experienced. So you replay everything. Every conversation. Every pause. Every almost confession. Especially the almost confessions. Those become emotional ghosts. I remember driving home one night after work with one hand on the steering wheel, replaying a moment where he almost said something vulnerable. Almost. That word can torture a person, because your mind starts filling in the missing pieces. He probably meant this. No, maybe I imagined it. But why did he look at me like that then? Round and round. And meanwhile, life keeps moving. Emails, groceries, work meetings, bills. That's what nobody explains properly about emotionally intense connections. Ordinary life continues at the exact same time your internal world becomes completely unrecognizable. I remember sitting through an entire dinner with friends while mentally elsewhere the whole time, laughing at the right moments, participating enough to seem present. Meanwhile, one part of my brain kept wondering, why did he suddenly disappear emotionally after getting closer? And the frustrating thing was, I knew better. I knew silence does not always mean lack of care. But emotionally, silence still hurts the body like rejection, especially uncertain silence. Not the kind where someone clearly says, I need space. At least honesty gives your nervous system something solid to hold. No, this was vaguer than that. This was him watching my story at 1 a.m., but not responding to my message until noon. This was long pauses between conversations followed by emotionally warm returns that confused everything again. This was distance without full detachment, which honestly might be harder than losing someone completely, because complete endings eventually force acceptance. Ambiguous silence keeps hope alive just enough to exhaust you. And I think part of him felt it too. You could tell sometimes, not directly, indirectly, through tiny behaviors that betrayed emotional presence. He would disappear for days emotionally, then randomly send something thoughtful that proved he was still paying attention the entire time. Like mentioning a detail I forgot I told him, or sending a song at midnight without explanation. Not enough to resolve the distance, just enough to reopen it emotionally. At one point, I remember throwing my phone onto the couch or one of his messages because I felt genuinely angry. Not because he contacted me, because he sounded emotionally sincere again. And sincerity after silence is destabilizing when you're trying to emotionally detach. Part of me wanted him to either fully leave or fully stay. This in-between state was slowly consuming both of us. I could feel it. There's a specific exhaustion that comes from emotionally waiting for clarity while pretending you're not waiting at all. And the body keeps score of that tension. Sleep becomes weird. You wake up already emotionally alert. You hear your phone vibrate and your heart reacts before your brain checks who it is. You start measuring emotional safety through digital behaviors. Was he online? Did he read it? Why did he respond warmly yesterday and distant today? It sounds irrational until you're emotionally attached to someone inconsistent. Then, suddenly every tiny interaction feels emotionally loaded. I remember opening our chat one night just to reread old conversations. Not because I wanted to text him. I wanted evidence. Evidence that what I felt had actually happened. Because silence creates self-doubt eventually. You start questioning your own memory. Maybe I exaggerated the connection. Maybe he was just being nice. Maybe I projected depth onto normal interactions. Then you read something and immediately feel your chest tighten because no. Something real was there. Maybe not stable. Maybe not mature. Maybe not sustainable. But real. That realization became both comforting and painful. Comforting because I wasn't imagining everything. Painful because reality didn't automatically create emotional availability. That's another brutal truth people avoid admitting. Someone can genuinely feel deeply for you and still lack the emotional capacity to stay close consistently. I think I spent months trying to negotiate with that reality internally, trying to decide whether understanding someone's fear made the experience less painful. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it honestly made it worse. Because once you recognize the humanity underneath someone's avoidance, anger becomes harder to maintain. You start seeing the exhaustion in them too. And he looked exhausted sometimes. Emotionally exhausted. Like someone fighting feelings instead of experiencing them naturally. I remember one conversation where he sounded strangely detached. Flat. Almost cold. And midway through the conversation there was this long silence. Then quietly he said, "I don't know why I do this. He didn't explain further. He didn't have to. That moment stayed with me because it sounded less like manipulation and more like confusion. Like he genuinely did not understand why closeness made him pull away. And honestly, that made the silence sadder. Because suddenly it wasn't us versus each other. It was two people struggling separately inside the same emotional dynamic. One person afraid of abandonment, the other afraid of emotional engulfment. One reaching for reassurance, the other reaching for distance the moment emotions deepened. Both suffering differently, neither fully able to stop the cycle. I think people underestimate how emotionally loud silence becomes when feelings remain unresolved, especially at night. Nighttime changes everything. Distractions disappear. The nervous system slows down enough for suppressed feelings to surface. That's when memories become physical. You remember tiny things. The exact way he leaned against the car door. The sound of his laugh when he was genuinely relaxed. The strange softness in his eyes right before he emotionally withdrew again. And the body reacts like the memory is happening in real time. That's the invisible part nobody sees. How emotionally present someone can remain long after the actual interaction ends. I remember hearing someone laugh at a coffee shop once and immediately turning around because it sounded like him. My body reacted before logic did. For half a second, I genuinely thought he was there. When I realized it wasn't him, I felt both relief and disappointment at the exact same time. Relief because seeing him unexpectedly probably would have wrecked me emotionally that day. Disappointment because, well, part of me still wanted to. That contradiction became normal eventually. Missing someone while trying to heal from them. Wanting contact while fearing what contact would restart. Understanding someone's behavior while still feeling hurt by it. And underneath all of it was silence. Not empty silence. Emotionally crowded silence. The kind where nothing is being said directly, while everything important is still somehow being felt anyway. I think she noticed the emotional shifts long before she admitted them out loud. That's usually how it starts. Not with certainty, with discomfort. Tiny discomforts. The kind you can explain away individually, but somehow feel devastating when they pile together quietly over time. A slower response. A shorter sentence. A warmth that suddenly feels slightly restrained. Nothing dramatic enough to confront. Just enough to make her nervous system stop relaxing completely. And honestly, I think that's what people misunderstand about emotionally intuitive women. They imagine intuition as some mystical superpower. Most of the time, it's much less glamorous than that. It's pattern recognition mixed with emotional sensitivity. It's noticing the difference between "I'm busy" and "I'm emotionally pulling away, but still trying to appear present." Those are not the same energy, even if the words sound identical. And the painful part is she usually feels the contradiction before she can logically prove it. That's what makes her start questioning herself. Because externally, everything may still appear normal. He still responds, still checks in, still says the right things sometimes. Meanwhile, internally, she feels this growing emotional instability she can't fully explain. I remember exactly when that started happening to me. I was folding laundry. That's the annoying thing about emotional pain. It interrupts incredibly ordinary moments. 1 second you're matching socks. The next your chest suddenly feels heavy because you realize someone's emotional presence has changed. And I remember stopping mid-fold thinking, no, don't start this. Like I could negotiate with my own intuition. Because part of me already knew. Not fully. Not consciously. But somewhere underneath the overthinking, I knew his energy had shifted emotionally. Not disappeared. Shifted. That distinction matters. If he had become cold completely, maybe it would have hurt less eventually. But no. He stayed emotionally inconsistent. Warm enough to keep connection alive. Distant enough to create confusion. That combination will psychologically dismantle a person if it lasts long enough. Especially someone emotionally attuned. Because the feminine in these dynamics often starts trying to solve the inconsistency emotionally. She analyzes tone, timing, behavior, not because she enjoys overthinking, because her body is trying to restore emotional safety. And honestly, I hated how aware I became. I hated noticing everything. The slight delay before he answered vulnerable questions. The way his voice changed after emotionally intimate moments. How he sometimes sounded emotionally exhausted after getting too close. At one point, one remembers staring at a completely normal text from him for almost 10 minutes trying to figure out why it felt emotionally off. Not rude. Not uncaring. Just thinner somehow. Less emotionally present. And I remember feeling embarrassed immediately afterward. Because who wants to become the woman decoding punctuation for emotional meaning? That version of myself felt humiliating. I kept thinking, you are too emotionally affected by this. Get a grip. This is unhealthy. But the body doesn't care about pride once attachment forms. That's the brutal part. You can intellectually understand a situation completely and still emotionally react to it anyway. I understood his avoidance patterns before I emotionally detached from them. Those are very different things. And the contradiction started exhausting me. Because there were moments where I felt deeply loved by him. Not verbally always. Behaviorally. The attentiveness. The emotional softness that appeared unexpectedly. The way he listened when he forgot to guard himself. But then there were other moments where I felt emotionally abandoned while still technically connected to him. That duality is psychologically disorienting. You start oscillating between, he cares about me deeply, and if he cares, why does this feel so lonely sometimes? That question followed me everywhere. Driving, cooking, trying to sleep, especially at night. Nighttime is dangerous when someone becomes emotionally inconsistent in your life. Because during the day you can distract yourself. Work, friends, tasks, noise. But late at night, the emotional truth becomes louder. That's when you start replaying things. I remember lying in bed rereading old messages, trying to understand where the emotional shift began. Like maybe if I found the exact moment, I could fix it somehow. Which is ridiculous in retrospect. Human beings are not equations. Still, when you're emotionally attached, your mind starts treating relationships like investigations. You search for clues. And I think deep down, I was searching for reassurance more than answers. Reassurance that I wasn't imagining the connection. Reassurance that the warmth had been real. Reassurance that his distance didn't erase everything that came before it. Because emotionally inconsistent people create a strange form of grief. You mourn someone who is still partially there. That's what makes it so difficult to leave psychologically. If he had fully disappeared emotionally, maybe my nervous system eventually would have accepted it. But he kept returning. And every return reopened hope. A thoughtful message. An emotionally vulnerable conversation. A moment where he looked at me with that same terrifying softness again. Then afterward, distance. Again. Like closeness activated something in him that immediately needed regulation. And eventually I started changing around that cycle. That's the part people don't discuss honestly enough. Emotionally inconsistent dynamics slowly alter your personality. You become more anxious, more hyper-aware, more self-conscious emotionally. You stop expressing needs naturally because you fear becoming too much. I remember typing out a vulnerable message once. Something honest, simple, then deleting almost the entire thing before sending it because I suddenly felt ashamed for having emotional needs at all. That moment bothered me afterward. Not because of him specifically, because I realized I was becoming emotionally smaller to avoid triggering distance. And the feminine often does that quietly. She adapts, softens herself, tries to appear less emotionally affected than she really is. Meanwhile, internally, she's drowning in contradiction. One part of her knows she deserves consistency. Another part keeps empathizing with his wounds. And honestly, that empathy can become self-destructive if it lacks boundaries. Because understanding why someone struggles emotionally does not remove the impact of their behavior. I had to learn that painfully. There were nights I defended him in my own head while simultaneously crying because of the emotional instability. That contradiction sounds absurd until you experience it. You become both the protector and the abandoned person at the same time. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor one night after a particularly distant week between us. Not having a breakdown exactly, just emotionally exhausted. I stared at my phone thinking, if I matter this much to him, why does this feel so hard? Then another thought came immediately after. What if it feels hard because I matter? That realization didn't comfort me the way people think it would. It actually made me sadder, because it meant the problem was an absence of feeling. It was inability to sustain emotional closeness safely. And women feel that distinction deeply, even when they can't articulate it yet. She notices when a man loves her with fear attached to it. She notices when he reaches for closeness, then resents his own vulnerability afterward. She notices when his silence feels emotionally loaded instead of peaceful. And over time, that awareness creates emotional fatigue. Because she starts carrying both people emotionally. Monitoring his moods, predicting withdrawals, preparing herself for emotional distance before it happens. That level of vigilance drains the nervous system completely. I became quieter eventually, not because I cared less, because I was tired. Tired of emotionally bracing for inconsistency, tired of trying to decode mixed signals. Tired of feeling emotionally connected and emotionally lonely simultaneously. And I think he noticed the change in me too. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were talking normally, but I wasn't emotionally reaching toward him the same way anymore. I had started protecting myself internally, and he suddenly became more attentive again, softer, more emotionally present. That's another painful irony of these dynamics. Sometimes the feminine starts detaching only after exhausting herself trying to hold the connection together emotionally. And suddenly the masculine feels the shift. Not because she stopped loving him instantly, because she stopped chasing emotional certainty from someone unable to provide it consistently. But even then, even while pulling back, she still feels him. That's the part nobody understands unless they've lived it. Detachment is not always immediate emotional disappearance. Sometimes you're healing while still deeply connected emotionally. Sometimes you miss someone while actively trying to let them go. Sometimes you stop texting first, while still checking your phone hoping they'll reach for you differently this time. And sometimes the most painful realization is this: she was never crazy. She was reacting to emotional inconsistency her body recognized long before her mind stopped making excuses for it. I think people imagine masculine longing looking dramatic, like a man standing in the rain realizing he made a terrible mistake. But honestly, most of the time it looks much smaller than that. Much quieter. Much more embarrassing. It looks like a man opening her profile at 12:48 a.m. while pretending he was just bored. It looks like hearing her favorite song in a grocery store and suddenly forgetting what he came there to buy. It looks like sitting in a parked car too long after work because going home means being alone with his thoughts again. That's the version nobody talks about. The deeply ordinary haunting of someone who tried to emotionally detach before he was actually ready to lose the connection. And I don't think he understood what was happening to him at first. That's important. People assume avoidance means emotional clarity. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes people create distance because their feelings became too emotionally disruptive to manage directly. And once the distance exists, the feelings don't disappear. They just become quieter and weirder. I remember this phase so clearly in him because his behavior became unintentionally revealing. Not through confessions, through tiny involuntary things, like sending me a picture of something random that reminded him of a conversation we had months earlier. No emotional context, no vulnerability attached, just, "This made me think of you," as if that sentence wasn't emotionally loaded already. And I think that's what made him so confusing sometimes. He would avoid direct intimacy, while constantly leaking attachment through indirect behaviors. It was almost worse that way, because emotionally avoidant people often express longing sideways, through music, memories, small check-ins, half-finished sentences, anything except direct emotional exposure. I remember one night he randomly asked if I still went to the coffee shop near my apartment. Such a harmless question, but I knew immediately he had been thinking about me before sending it. You don't suddenly remember someone's coffee shop at midnight emotionally by accident. Still, instead of saying, "I miss you," he asked about a location. That's how some men survive vulnerability, through emotional coding. And honestly, part of me understood it. Another part wanted to scream. Because there's something painful about watching someone miss you in emotionally fragmented ways. Especially when you know pride is involved. Or fear. Or shame. Sometimes all three. I think he genuinely believed distance would help him regain emotional control. Like, if he stopped feeding the connection, eventually the feelings would reduce naturally. Instead, everything started reminding him of me. That's usually how it happens. Not constantly. Not dramatically. In flashes. He'd be fine for hours. Then suddenly destroyed emotionally for 7 minutes because he heard someone laugh like me. That's the thing about attachment. The mind can avoid. The body remembers anyway. I could feel this happening in him even before he admitted it indirectly. His distractions became louder. More work. More busyness. More emotional unavailability disguised as productivity. I remember one week where he suddenly became extremely focused on work. Almost aggressively focused. Posting less. Replying slower. Acting emotionally occupied all the time. At first I thought, he's pulling away permanently. But then during one conversation, he accidentally referenced something I posted days earlier that he never acknowledged directly. That moment told me everything. Emotionally detached people don't absorb tiny details that carefully. Avoidant people often look away while still watching. And honestly, I think that realization hurt him too. Because once he understood he still cared deeply despite the distance, he lost the illusion of emotional control. That illusion matters to some men more than connection itself, especially men who associate emotional dependence with weakness. You could hear the internal conflict in him sometimes. One part wanting closeness, another part almost angry that he wanted it. I remember a conversation where he sounded unusually frustrated. Not with me exactly, with himself. He kept saying things like, "I don't know why this is affecting me this much." That sentence stayed with me because it sounded so unfiltered. Not romantic, not polished, just frustrated confusion. Like he genuinely thought emotional distance was supposed to make everything easier. Instead, it made the silence louder. And masculine loneliness often becomes behavioral before it becomes verbal. That's another thing people miss. Men don't always sit around articulating emotional pain clearly. Sometimes they start overworking, scrolling endlessly, staying awake till late, go and emotionally numb around other people, trying to outrun attachment through stimulation. I think he did all of that, especially the scrolling. There's a very specific sadness in watching someone consume distraction because stillness brings up too much feeling. I remember him once joking, "I can't sleep anymore." He laughed when he said it, but his eyes looked exhausted. And I knew immediately what kind of insomnia it was. Not practical stress, emotional noise. The kind where your body is tired, but your mind keeps replaying unresolved emotional experiences. Especially at night. Night exposed him. During the day, he could perform normalcy. Work, humor, movement, tasks. But late at night, that's when he started reaching indirectly again. Random messages, old memories, songs without explanation, almost conversations. One time he sent me a voice note after midnight and deleted it before I could hear it. That bothered me for days. Not because of the voice note itself, because I knew exactly what happened emotionally. He probably recorded something honest, then panic after hearing his own vulnerability out loud. That's the tragedy of emotionally guarded men sometimes. They reveal themselves accidentally, then immediately try to erase the evidence. But the body betrays attachment anyway. The timing, the returns, the emotional hovering. Even his silence started feeling emotionally occupied. I think part of him wanted me to notice he missed me without forcing him to fully admit it. Which sounds immature because honestly, sometimes it was. That's another truth people avoid saying. Sometimes emotionally significant connections bring out deeply immature coping mechanisms, especially in people who never learned how to process emotional dependency safely. There were moments where he acted incredibly self-aware. Then moments where he emotionally disappeared like a terrified teenager. Human beings are contradictory under emotional pressure, especially men taught to suppress vulnerability until suppression becomes instinctive. And I don't think he expected missing me to feel so physical. That part shocked him. The heaviness, the restlessness, the inability to emotionally settle fully. I think he thought longing would feel poetic. Instead, it irritated him, disrupted him, made ordinary moments emotionally inconvenient. Like standing in line somewhere and suddenly remembering the exact way I looked at him during a conversation he pretended didn't affect him. Or driving at night and replaying something I said months ago. Or hearing a phrase I used and physically reacting before his thoughts caught up. That's the part about attachment nobody glamorizes properly. It's intrusive. It interrupts. And when someone suppresses emotions instead of processing them, the feelings usually leak out sideways. I remember one conversation where he suddenly got strangely quiet after I laughed at something. Not emotionally bad quiet, just distant suddenly. Then finally he said, "I forgot what your laugh sounded like." God, that sentence. It sounded so small when he said it, but underneath it was weeks of emotional restraint collapsing accidentally into one honest moment. And the strange thing is, he looked almost uncomfortable after admitting it, like the vulnerability itself embarrassed him. So immediately afterward he changed the subject. That became his pattern. Reveal, retreat, reveal, retreat. And honestly, I think he hated how emotionally affected he still was. Not because the feelings weren't real, because the feelings made him feel emotionally exposed. There's a difference. One night, I remember imagining the internal conversation he probably had with himself constantly. You miss her. Temporarily. No, honestly. Silence. Then text her. What would that solve? The silence is killing you. The closeness was too much. And this feels better? Long silence. No. That's the painful irony. Some people choose emotional distance not because it feels good, but because vulnerability feels even more threatening. So they settle for longing instead. Controlled suffering. Private suffering. The kind nobody sees because externally they still function normally. And maybe that's why masculine grief often goes unnoticed. Because many men keep performing competence while emotionally unraveling quietly underneath. Still going to work. Still joking. Still replying casually. Meanwhile, they're sitting alone at 1 a.m. reopening old conversations they pretend don't matter anymore. Trying to feel close without risking rejection directly. Trying to reduce attachment while secretly feeding it in tiny invisible ways. And the saddest part, I think he genuinely believed he was protecting himself, without realizing the avoidance itself had already become another form of pain. I think the hardest part wasn't the attraction. It was what the connection started revealing. About him. About me. About the emotional survival strategies we both disguised as personality traits. Because eventually the relationship stopped feeling romantic in the clean, exciting way people talk about online. It became reflective. Uncomfortably reflective. Like standing too close to a mirror under harsh lighting. At first, I thought the pain was coming from his inconsistency alone. And yes, his avoidance hurt me. But eventually I had to admit something I didn't want to look at. I was abandoning myself in slower, quieter ways too. That realization made me sick, honestly. Because it's easier to blame emotionally unavailable people than admit how much of yourself you sacrificed trying to emotionally secure them. And I did sacrifice parts of myself. Small parts at first. My honesty. My emotional steadiness. My ability to relax naturally. I became strategic emotionally. That's when you know something is damaging your nervous system. When you stop speaking naturally and start managing your emotional expression for survival. I remember rewriting texts to sound less emotional. Not more clear. Less emotional. Like vulnerability itself had become dangerous. I'd stare at messages thinking, no, that sounds too needy. Take that part out. Don't mention you were hurt. Keep it light. Meanwhile, internally, I was anything but light. That contradiction slowly started breaking me down. And I think he was breaking down too, just differently. That's the strange thing about emotionally intense connections between wounded people. Both people suffer, but in opposite directions. She moves toward closeness when afraid. He moves away from it. She seeks reassurance. He seeks space. And both people secretly resent the other for coping differently. I remember one argument that technically wasn't even an argument. That's how emotionally fractured things had become. We were talking normally, but underneath the conversation, I could feel tension sitting there between us like another person in the room. Finally, I asked, "Why do you disappear every time we get close?" And immediately, I regretted asking. Not because it was unfair, because he looked genuinely overwhelmed by the question. Like I had dragged something private into direct light before he was ready. He got quiet for a long time. Then finally, "I don't know." I believed him. That's what made it worse. Because there's something heartbreaking about watching someone hurt you from a place of confusion instead of malice. If he were cold, I could have detached faster. But no, he cared. He just didn't know how to stay emotionally present consistently once vulnerability entered the relationship. And honestly, I didn't know how to stop chasing clarity from someone emotionally inconsistent. So both of us became trapped inside our own emotional reflexes. His, retreat. Mine, pursuit. And the more those instincts activated, the more we triggered each other. That's when the connection started feeling less like romance and more like exposure. I became aware of how terrified I was of emotional abandonment. Not theoretically, physically. You can feel abandonment fears in the body. Restlessness, obsessive thinking, difficulty concentrating, emotional hypervigilance. And he became aware of how deeply intimacy destabilized him. Not because intimacy was bad, because emotional dependence made him feel vulnerable in ways he wasn't equipped to regulate. So when I reached for reassurance, he felt pressure. And when he pulled away, I felt panic. Neither response was fully rational. Both were deeply human. I think people romanticize emotional intensity because they confuse recognition with compatibility. Those are not always the same thing. Sometimes someone recognizes your wounds before they know how to love you safely. That realization hit me slowly, painfully slowly. There were moments where we understood each other emotionally almost too well. Moments where he could sense my mood before I spoke. Moments where I knew he was overwhelmed before he admitted it. But emotional awareness alone doesn't create stability. In fact, sometimes it makes dysfunction more emotionally addictive. Because you keep thinking, "But they understand me." Meanwhile, both people are quietly exhausting each other emotionally. I remember one night where everything between us felt especially fragile. We had spent the entire day emotionally close, laughing naturally, talking easily, no distance. For a few hours it felt simple again. That's what made what happened afterwards so painful. Because later that night I could feel him emotionally shutting down in real time. His responses slowed. His tone flattened slightly. Nothing obvious. Nothing confrontational. But I felt it immediately. And I remember this awful internal conversation starting inside me. Don't react. But something changed. Maybe he's tired. No, this is the shift again. Don't make it bigger than it is. But why does this keep happening after good moments? That last thought haunted me. Why after good moments? Why after closeness? Eventually, I understood. For some people, emotional intimacy activates grief, fear, vulnerability, loss of control all at once. Closeness doesn't relax them. It exposes them. So they retreat to regulate themselves. The problem is, the retreat creates abandonment wounds in the other person, which then creates more emotional pursuit, which creates more overwhelm. And suddenly both people are trapped reacting instead of relating. I think that's when I stopped seeing him as simply the avoidant one. Because honestly, I had my own unhealthy patterns too. I confused emotional intensity with emotional depth sometimes. I stayed longer than my nervous system could tolerate, because I kept hoping consistency would finally arrive. I kept trying to emotionally understand behavior that was actively hurting me. And maybe part of me believed if I loved him carefully enough, softly enough, patiently enough, he would eventually stop running from closeness. That belief exhausted me, because healing another person through understanding is not actually love. Sometimes it's self-abandonment wearing empathy as a disguise. That realization came late. Too late, maybe. I remember sitting in my car after seeing him one evening feeling completely emotionally drained. Not devastated, just tired. Tired of monitoring shifts. Tired of anticipating distance. Tired of carrying emotional uncertainty in my body constantly. And the strangest part, I still loved him. Or something very close to love. That's what made it complicated. Because emotionally unhealthy dynamics are easier to leave when there's no real tenderness inside them. But there was tenderness. So much tenderness. In his eyes sometimes. In the way he remembered tiny details. In the softness that appeared when he stopped guarding himself. But tenderness without emotional consistency eventually becomes painful too. That's another truth people avoid. Love is not only about feeling deeply, it's also about emotional safety, stability, presence, and we kept failing each other there. Not because we didn't care, because neither of us was fully emotionally equipped for the connection we had entered. That's difficult to admit honestly, especially because modern conversations about relationships usually want a clear villain. But real emotional dynamics are often much messier. Sometimes one person withdraws because they're terrified of losing themselves inside intimacy. Sometimes the other clings harder because inconsistency activates old wounds they thought they had healed. Sometimes both people unintentionally recreate emotional environments they swore they'd never live through again. And sometimes the connection itself becomes a mirror forcing both people to confront parts of themselves they had carefully avoided for years. That's what happened to us. He forced me to see how much I feared being emotionally left. I forced him to see how deeply he feared emotional closeness. Neither of us intended to expose those wounds in each other, but we did, constantly. Even silence became reflective eventually. I could feel when he wanted closeness, but didn't know how to ask for it. I think he could feel when I was pretending to be emotionally okay while quietly falling apart. And maybe that's why the connection became so difficult to fully walk away from. Because underneath the dysfunction, there was recognition. Not perfect compatibility. Not perfect timing. Recognition. The painful kind. The kind where another person accidentally becomes the mirror you can no longer avoid looking into, even when part of you desperately wants to look away. I think the truth arrives quietly for most people. Not during dramatic endings. Not during speeches. Not during perfectly timed moments of clarity. Usually, it arrives late at night when there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. That's when the emotional noise starts getting honest. And honestly, I think both of us had those nights. The kind where you tell yourself you're moving on, but somehow end up sitting in the dark reopening old conversations you swore you were done reading. The kind where you almost text someone 3 separate times and delete every version before sending it. Not because you have nothing to say, because suddenly every sentence feels too vulnerable. I remember one night specifically. I was sitting on my bedroom floor charging my phone because the charger cable barely reached the bed. Tiny detail, completely irrelevant. And somehow I still remember it because emotional memories attach themselves to ordinary environments. The room was quiet except for the sound of traffic outside and the low hum of my fan. I should have been asleep. Instead, I was rereading a conversation from months earlier, trying to understand why one particular sentence still affected me. Not even a romantic sentence. Just him saying, I feel calmer when I talk to you. That line destroyed me more over time, not less. Because eventually I realized how hard it probably was for him to admit even that much. And suddenly all the moments I interpreted as emotional indifference started rearranging themselves in my head. Not disappearing, just becoming more complicated. That's the dangerous thing about late-night reflection. The emotional context expands. You stop seeing only your pain. You start seeing theirs too. And once empathy enters grief, closure becomes harder. Because anger is easier to organize emotionally. Confusion mixed with tenderness. That's harder to survive cleanly. I think he had nights like that too. You could tell from the timing of things sometimes. The random midnight messages. The sudden emotional openness after days of silence. The way he occasionally sounded like someone losing an argument with himself internally. One night he texted me, "Do you ever think about everything too much?" I stared at that message for a long time. Because obviously that question wasn't really about overthinking. It was about emotional hunting. About replaying things internally that your pride won't let you speak directly. And I remember wanting to answer honestly. Something vulnerable. Something real. Instead I replied, "Only at night." Which was technically true, but incomplete. Nighttime made everything louder. Especially regret. Regret has a strange schedule. It rarely arrives during the moment itself. It arrives later. In stillness. In hindsight. Like suddenly realizing somebody loved you in the exact language you were too wounded to recognize at the time. Or realizing someone's distance came from fear instead of lack of feeling. Not always, but sometimes. And honestly, that realization can break your heart differently. Because once you understand someone more deeply, the past becomes harder to simplify emotionally. I think that happened to him slowly. Very slowly. I don't think avoidant people suddenly wake up one day fully aware of their emotional patterns. I think awareness leaks in gradually through loneliness. Through missing someone longer than expected. Through realizing distractions stopped working. I imagine there were nights where he sat alone feeling emotionally restless without fully understanding why. Scrolling endlessly. Opening apps without purpose. Trying to outrun thoughts that kept circling back to the same person. That's another thing nobody says enough. Avoidance looks emotionally detached from the outside, while internally the person may be completely consumed. I remember one conversation where he admitted something accidentally. Not directly. Indirectly. He said, "I keep thinking I'm over it until something random reminds me of you." The way he said it mattered. Not dramatic. Not romanticized. Annoyed. Like he was frustrated by the persistence of his own attachment. And honestly, I understood that feeling too. Because missing someone becomes humiliating after enough time passes. Especially when you're trying to heal. You start getting angry at your own emotional memory. Why does this still hurt? Why am I still thinking about this? Why does one person still occupy this much space in my nervous system? I asked myself those questions constantly. Usually around midnight. Usually while trying not to check his profile. Sometimes succeeding. Sometimes not. That's the embarrassing reality nobody admits publicly. Healing is rarely graceful. Sometimes healing looks like opening someone's page, staring at it for 30 seconds, then closing the app aggressively like, "No, we're not doing this tonight." Then reopening it 12 minutes later. Human beings are emotionally ridiculous when attachment and unfinished grief combine. And I think part of what kept haunting both of us was the lack of clean closure. Not because we didn't talk, because we never fully said the deepest parts out loud. We danced around them, emotionally circled them, hinted, paused, retreated, but direct honesty, rare, which meant the relationship continued emotionally even inside silence. That's what unfinished emotional experiences do. The body keeps trying to complete them internally. I remember driving home one night after seeing Friends. Everyone else had left. Music low, empty streets, and suddenly this wave of grief hit me so unexpectedly I had to pull into a parking lot for a few minutes. Not dramatic crying, just sitting there gripping the steering wheel feeling emotionally exhausted. And the strangest thought entered my head. He loved me in the only way he knew how. I hated that thought immediately, because part of me wanted clearer villains, cleaner endings, more obvious emotional negligence. But human beings are rarely that simple. Sometimes people hurt you while genuinely caring. Sometimes they fail you because they're emotionally unequipped, not emotionally empty. That distinction became harder to ignore over time, especially because I started recognizing my own mistakes too. The pressure I put on him emotionally sometimes, the reassurance I kept searching for, the way I occasionally tried to force emotional clarity before he was capable of giving it honestly. We both wanted things from each other we didn't fully know how to sustain. That realization softened me eventually, not into denial, into complexity. And complexity is emotionally uncomfortable because it prevents easy narratives. Nobody was entirely innocent. Nobody was entirely cruel. Just two emotionally overwhelmed people trying to manage a connection that activated unresolved parts of themselves, and sometimes failing badly at it. I think he realized certain truths too late. That avoidance doesn't erase attachment. That emotional suppression eventually turns into loneliness. That distance can protect you from vulnerability temporarily, while quietly starving you emotionally long-term. But late realizations are painful because by the time awareness arrives, damage already exists. I could hear that regret in him sometimes, especially during quieter conversations. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were talking casually and suddenly he got quiet. Then he said, "I think I made things harder than they needed to be." That sentence sat between us heavily, because it was true, and because we both knew it referred to far more than whatever conversation we were technically having. I didn't know what to say, partially because I had imagined hearing accountability from him for so long, and partially because hearing it finally didn't undo the emotional exhaustion already living inside me. That's another painful truth. Awareness matters, but delayed awareness doesn't automatically repair emotional damage. Sometimes people grow emotionally after the relationship already fractured. Sometimes clarity arrives after trust has been strained too many times. And still, even then, the connection remains emotionally significant. That's what complicated everything. No matter how much pain existed, neither of us could fully reduce the relationship into something meaningless. The feelings were too real for that. The reactions were too physical, too involuntary. Even silence carried emotional weight. And maybe that's why late-night realizations feel so devastating. Because nighttime removes performance. No distractions. No ego management. No emotional pretending. Just you, your memories, and the uncomfortable truth that some people changed you more deeply than you wanted to admit. Even if the relationship itself remained unresolved. Even if part of you still wishes things had unfolded differently. Even if another part still doesn't fully know what to call what happened between you at all. I think one of the hardest things to accept is that not every important relationship ends with resolution. Sometimes there's no final conversation that explains everything. No perfect apology. No cinematic reunion. No clean emotional conclusion where both people suddenly become self-aware at exactly the same time. Sometimes people just change each other permanently and leave, or stay emotionally unfinished in each other for years. That's the part nobody prepares you for, because most people are taught to think in endings. Together, separated, healed, moved on. But emotionally significant connections don't always follow linear timelines like that. Sometimes someone leaves your daily life while remaining deeply present in your emotional architecture. Quietly, persistently, not every day, but enough. I realized this slowly. At first, I thought healing meant eventually feeling nothing. No reaction. No memories that still hurt. No emotional charge. But that's not actually what happened. Instead, the relationship slowly changed shape inside me. Less consuming, less obsessive, but deeper somehow. Like grief turning into scar tissue. Still sensitive in certain weather. I remember the first time I noticed I had changed because of him. I was talking to someone new. Nice person. Emotionally available. Consistent. And instead of feeling relieved immediately, I felt strangely cautious. Not because of anything they did wrong. Because after emotional inconsistency, your nervous system stops trusting warmth easily. You start waiting for the shift, the withdrawal, the emotional disappearance after intimacy, even when it never comes. That's what unresolved emotional dynamics do. They retrain your body around unpredictability. I caught myself monitoring small things automatically. Response times, changes in tone, energy shifts. And halfway through one conversation, I suddenly thought, oh my God, I learned this. Not consciously. Conditioning happens quietly. That realization made me emotional in a way I didn't expect. Because suddenly I understood. This connection didn't just affect my feelings. It altered my emotional reflexes. And honestly, I think I changed him too. Even if he never admitted the full extent of it. You can feel when someone carries your emotional fingerprints afterward. In the way they speak softer than they used to. In the pauses before they answer vulnerable questions. In the strange heaviness they carry around intimacy now. People change each other through experience more than intention. That's why some connections remain significant even without formal commitment. The nervous system remembers emotional impact more than labels. And maybe that's why certain people become impossible to fully reduce into just a lesson. That phrase always irritated me. Everything is just a lesson. No. Some people become part of your emotional language permanently. Not because they were perfect. Because they reached parts of you other people didn't. Even if the relationship itself was messy. Especially if it was messy. I remember one afternoon months later hearing a phrase he used to say casually. Something completely ordinary. And my body reacted instantly before my thoughts even formed. That scared me a little. Not because I wanted him back exactly. Because I realized emotional memory lives deeper than conscious decisions sometimes. You can choose distance. You can choose silence. You can choose healing. But the body still remembers what emotional significance felt like. That doesn't mean you belong together forever. I had to learn that distinction carefully. Because for a while I confused emotional permanence with relational destiny. Those are not the same thing. Some people permanently affect you without permanently staying. That truth is painful, but also strangely human. I think both of us struggled with that. Especially because neither of us got the kind of closure people imagine should exist after our emotionally intense connections. There was no definitive final chapter. Just gradual distance. Occasional returns. Emotional echoes. At one point we became strangers in the most intimate way possible, still knowing each other emotionally, while no longer fully participating in each other's lives. That experience changes a person. There's grief in realizing someone can understand your inner world deeply and still be unable to remain consistently present inside it. And honestly, I think that reality humbled both of us. Because eventually you stop romanticizing emotional intensity once you survive enough of it. You start valuing steadiness differently, communication differently, peace differently. I remember a moment where I almost reached out to him again after a long silence. I typed the message, deleted it, rewrote it, deleted it again. Then I sat there staring at the screen, realizing something uncomfortable. Part of me no longer wanted to restart the emotional cycle, even though I still loved parts of him deeply. That was new. For a long time, missing him automatically created desire for reconnection. But eventually grief matures. You start recognizing the difference between "I miss you" and "I can survive missing you." Those are completely different emotional states. I think he reached similar realizations too. Maybe not at the same pace. Maybe not in the same language. But I could feel shifts in him over time. Less avoidance disguised as indifference. More awareness in his tone. More honesty hidden inside smaller senses. Once he said, "I think I understand some things now that I didn't before." He didn't elaborate. Of course he didn't. But honestly, he didn't need to. Some sentences carry entire emotional histories underneath them. And I remember feeling both warmth and sadness hearing that. Because awareness arriving late is bittersweet. You're grateful for the growth, but part of you mourns the timing. What could we have been if we met each other differently emotionally? That question haunted me for a long time. Not obsessively, quietly, like background music in another room. I think emotionally unfinished relationships create alternate timelines inside people's minds. Versions of what might have happened if both people had been healthier, braver, more emotionally available, less afraid. But eventually I had to stop living inside hypothetical versions of us. Because the reality mattered too. The inconsistency, the exhaustion, the emotional confusion. Love alone doesn't erase nervous system damage. That was a difficult truth for me to accept. Because there were moments where the connection felt extraordinary emotionally. Rare even. But extraordinary emotional connection without stability eventually becomes emotionally unsustainable. You can't build safety on emotional unpredictability forever. The body eventually protests. Mine did. I became more tired than hopeful near the end. And honestly, I think he did too. That's another thing nobody talks about enough. Emotionally intense dynamics exhaust both people eventually. The anxious person becomes depleted from chasing certainty. The avoidant person becomes depleted from resisting emotional vulnerability constantly. Both people suffer, just differently. And maybe that's why compassion slowly replaced blame for me. Not immediately. There were periods of anger, periods of grief, periods where I replayed everything trying to identify who failed who first. But eventually, I just saw the human beings. Two emotionally overwhelmed people trying to love each other through unhealed survival patterns. Sometimes succeeding beautifully. Sometimes hurting each other unintentionally. Sometimes staying too long. Sometimes pulling away too fast. Human. Painfully human. I think that's why the connection still matters to me even now. Not because I believe every emotionally intense relationship is meant to last forever, but because some people permanently expand your emotional awareness. After him, I understood emotional inconsistency differently, loneliness differently, myself differently. I stopped romanticizing emotional unavailability, stopped confusing longing with compatibility, stopped believing love automatically heals emotional fear. And maybe he changed too. Maybe now he stays present a little longer when intimacy scares him. Maybe now he recognizes withdrawal before disappearing completely. Maybe now he understands that vulnerability is not weakness just because it feels destabilizing. I don't know. And honestly, part of maturity is learning to live without full access to another person's inner evolution. Still, sometimes I think about him unexpectedly, not with desperation anymore, more like emotional weather, a passing ache, a quiet warmth, a memory attached to a song or a street or a specific kind of silence. And maybe that's all some connections become eventually. Not active wounds, just permanent emotional landmarks. Proof that another human being reached you deeply enough to leave part of themselves inside your emotional memory. Even without closure, even without permanence, even without staying. I think what finally changed for me was realizing this connection never actually looked the way people describe these things online. It didn't feel enlightened. It felt human, messy, contradictory, emotionally inconvenient, sometimes beautiful, sometimes exhausting. And honestly, I think we both spent a long time trying to understand something that was much more ordinary than we wanted it to be. Not ordinary in intensity, ordinary in its humanity. Because when people talk about these kinds of connections, they often remove the embarrassing parts, the avoidance, the ego, the emotional immaturity, the mixed signals, the nights spent staring at a phone wanting someone to reach for you first. But that was the real experience, not constant emotional wisdom. Just two people affecting each other deeply while struggling to regulate what that actually meant. I remember the exact moment I stopped romanticizing it. I was sitting in my kitchen one morning drinking coffee that had already gone cold because I forgot about it. And I realized something uncomfortable. Part of the reason the connection felt so emotionally massive was because neither of us handled it particularly well. That thought humbled me. Because for a long time I kept trying to decide whether what happened between us was rare or meaningful or somehow bigger than ordinary relationships. Maybe it was. But honestly, I think the more important truth is that we were two emotionally unfinished people colliding at the wrong stage of our lives. And the collision changed us. Not magically, psychologically, emotionally, physically even. I still think about how strange it is that another human being can alter your nervous system. Not intentionally, just through repetition, attention, distance, closeness, withdrawal. Eventually, your body starts associating them with entire emotional states. That's why moving on never felt as simple as letting go. The connection lived in habits too, in reactions, in memories attached to ordinary places. I remember walking into a gas station months later and suddenly feeling emotional because they were playing a song he used to hum absent-mindedly in the car. Not even a meaningful song. That's what grief does. It attaches itself to tiny things. And honestly, the longer I sat with everything, the less interested I became in dramatic conclusions. I stopped needing to label it perfectly. Was it love, fear, attachment, recognition, trauma, timing? Probably all of it. Human emotions are rarely clean enough to separate neatly. I think part of maturity is accepting emotional complexity without trying to force every experience into a simple narrative. Because the truth is, sometimes someone loves you and still hurts you. Sometimes someone misses you while actively avoiding you. Sometimes someone feels deeply connected to you and still cannot sustain closeness without panicking. And sometimes you stay emotionally invested far longer than your pride thinks you should because the connection genuinely mattered. Not every truth sounds wise. Some truths sound humiliating, like realizing how many nights you checked your phone hoping for one specific person, or realizing you memorized somebody's emotional patterns more carefully than your own needs, or realizing you accepted emotional inconsistency because moments of closeness felt unbelievably real. That's not spiritual enlightenment. That's emotional vulnerability mixed with unmet needs and genuine tenderness. Human. I think that's why I eventually stopped seeing him as some symbolic figure in my life. He became more real to me over time, not less. Not the avoidant masculine. Not some emotionally unavailable archetype. Just a man. A complicated man. A man who sometimes wanted intimacy and resented needing it at the same time. A man who could be emotionally perceptive one day and emotionally shut down the next. A man who cared deeply while still lacking the emotional tools to express that care consistently. And honestly, I became more human to myself too. Not the emotionally awakened feminine. Just a woman trying to feel loved without abandoning herself in the process. A woman who sometimes confused emotional intensity with emotional safety. A woman who wanted reassurance while pretending to be emotionally independent. A woman who understood his pain while still feeling hurt by it. Both things true simultaneously. That's the part one wish more people admitted openly. Human beings are contradictory under emotional pressure. Even emotionally self-aware people regress sometimes. We say we want honesty, then panic when someone sees us too clearly. We say we want closeness, then become overwhelmed once attachment forms. We say we're healing, then reopen old messages at midnight because loneliness temporarily overpowers wisdom. That doesn't make people fake. It makes them human. And I think recognizing that softens something in me eventually. Not into fantasy, into acceptance. Not acceptance in the sense of everything happened for a reason. Honestly, I don't always believe that. Some things happen because people are wounded, because timing is wrong, because emotional fear overrides emotional capacity. But I do think certain connections force people into deeper self-awareness, whether they wanted it or not. He forced me to confront how easily I overfunction emotionally when someone becomes inconsistent. I forced him to confront how deeply he suppresses vulnerability once attachment becomes real. Neither of us walked away unchanged. And maybe that's enough meaning on its own. Not destiny. Impact. I think people underestimate impact. A person does not need to stay forever to alter your emotional landscape permanently. Sometimes someone changes the way you experience intimacy, conflict, silence, love. Sometimes they teach you what your nervous system can no longer tolerate. Sometimes they expose emotional wounds you didn't realize were still running your relationships. And sometimes they leave you with a strange mix of grief and gratitude that never fully resolves cleanly. That's probably the most honest description of how I feel now. Not devastated. Not fully detached either. Just aware. Aware that what happened mattered. Aware that it hurt. Aware that both of us were doing the best we could with emotional tools that were incomplete. Some days I still feel angry thinking about the inconsistency. Some days I miss him unexpectedly. Some days I feel relieved we never fully built a life together because emotionally we might have destroyed each other at that stage. And some days I just feel sad. Not dramatic sadness. Quiet sadness. The kind that arrives when you realize two people can genuinely care about each other and still fail to create emotional safety together. That truth used to terrify me. Now it just feels real. I think about one moment often. We were sitting in silence together once. No phones. No music. Just quiet. And I remember feeling this overwhelming sense that both of us were trying very hard not to reveal how emotionally affected we already were. Neither of us said it. Of course we didn't. But I think we both knew. The body always knows first. That moment stayed with me more than all the complicated conversations afterward. Because beneath all the confusion, there was sincerity there. Fear too. Ego too. Avoidance too. But sincerity. And maybe that's why some connections never fully disappear emotionally. Not because they were perfect. Because they were real enough to leave emotional fingerprints behind. Even after the relationship changes shape. Even after silence grows around it. Even after both people try to move forward separately. Sometimes I still wonder if he thinks about me during ordinary moments too. Driving somewhere at night. Standing in line for coffee. Hearing a phrase I used to say. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. I've stopped needing certainty about it. Mostly. Still. Every once in a while. I catch myself looking at my phone a second too long after it lights up. And for one tiny embarrassing moment, some part of me still hopes it's him.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.